Okay guys, this is the tactical meeting. A lot of the things that will go in the meeting today you've probably heard if you attended the previous one, but this is more of a recap of what we've discussed before, focused a lot more on everybody's role, but as well it will clarify a few points that people might still be confused about. So overall, all the fights we're gonna have for the foreseeable future will always involve a C push. Okay, sometimes we might do it on A, but generally speaking we run from this gate and we run straight to C. In terms of what we're gonna do when we reach the point, this is more or less our setup. So our tanks, which are represented here by shields, they'll be our front line. And the swords will be the bruisers. These red targets are fire, and these guys are healers. The frozen looking weird icons, these are hunters, and the bows are the bows. So generally speaking, this will be our setup with our bruisers in the front, behind them the fire and the healers. There might be situations where the backline will be slightly different, but I'll go through it in a second. So all in all, they usually mirror this setup. Okay, sometimes they can be slightly more on the flanks, but generally speaking, the meta is mirrored like this. What do we do once we get engagement, and how do we fight these Zerg fights? So I'll go through everybody's roles, so we can be clear what everybody needs to do, and later on we're going to practice this against Griffinheart. So the tanky boys, your job is really to tank. Okay, you try to make yourself big, you try to make yourself appealing for all the enemies to hit you, and your job is to survive while they do that. Okay, we all know that a tank with full heals on him, he can hold 10 people easily whacking at him without having to sweat too much. And if you can't do that, that means you need to review your build and just hit me up and I can go through that with you. But generally speaking, you want them to hit you as much as you can, because that means they're not going to hit your fire staffs and your healers. The other bruisers, whether you're heavy or medium, your job is really to push through like this, through basically their front line, and you try to stun them in the process. And the reason why we do that is so we can attack their backline from two different directions. So we have obviously the hunters trying to flank them, and the bruisers are pushing through. And the reason for that is if you only attack with the hunters, it's very easy for them to just keep an eye on those hunters flanking them, and even if they do pressure, let's say these people from the left flank, they have all these other people here who are basically just free casting, so it's not as efficient. The other reason is the bruisers pushing through give the enemies the idea that we have lots of bruisers and a lot of front lines. So what you don't want is for your bruisers to go somewhere else, or split too much from to the side, because any good enemy will notice that, well, hey, they just have 3 tanks there or 4 tanks holding us. You know, there's no reason why we can't just ignore them and push through. So you don't want them to kind of do that, because that means they are basically destroying our backline very easily. So this is the reason why we do this. Okay, all in all, there are advantages and disadvantages to it, but the positioning in terms of how we move once our bruisers move forward is that the healers might push slightly forward just behind the tanks, and that's so they can heal these bruisers who are pushing forward. What we ideally want to do with this is either kill them or push their mid and back line as much back as possible, because that basically separates their team more than more than it's acceptable to them. So most of the teams, when that happens, is they're going to try to pull back all the bruisers to try to compensate that, and that basically allows us to advance to the point. Okay, and that brings me to the next point. Okay, what we're going to do, we're not going to do any split pushes. At the moment they're not efficient in the current meta, and any good team will just take advantage of that, and basically they'll give up 1 or 2 points, following which they'll just desync your respawns, and they're just gonna farm you the whole fight. So the main focus that we're gonna have for at least the few future fights is that our Zerg team fighting needs to be really good. Okay, there will be times in the war when we just need to win the 50 versus 50 engages, so that needs to be really our focus, because that happens in the fort, that happens on the points. So the stronger we are as a 50, and the more we dominate those fights, the easier it will be for us. In terms of what we do, once C is captured, basically we push to B, and then we push to A. Okay, so that's gonna be more or less our only strategy. We might change the respawn points if for whatever reason they win the Zerg fights and they push us back to our spawn here. But you know, that's not ideal. So once they manage to do that, once they manage to push us back to spawn point, we kind of lost that fight. So changing respawns, you know, it's not really gonna help us much. It's just gonna give us a small reset to try again. Okay, so we went through the roles of the tanks and the bruisers. Now what happens to the other roles? So the hunters, their job is really to try to synchronize. Okay, ideally 3 hunters on a healer with a bow trying to follow up, and or a mage, and the bow try to follow up to secure that kill. And we'll try to run 2 hunter teams and at least 1 bow team. At the moment we don't really have a bow team, we have a few bow players, but you know, we need to build that up further. The healers, there's a few things in terms of builds. I think now that we dropped a lot of the IGVGs, the IGs are being taken up by the healers as well as mages to try to compensate that. So you basically throw your ice storms on the clumps just to slow those guys down, and your ice showers on any bruiser that pushes through. Okay, bruiser or hunter. So if you have hunters coming through your back like this, you're just trying to shower them and stop them basically from moving freely. The fire mages, okay, so your job is really crucial. In the past, everybody thought, yeah, fire mages will be OP after the patch, they're all gonna nuke everything and they're just gonna blow up everything. It's not really the case. It's still a bit more towards damage over time rather than full burst crazy damage. But you have really 2 jobs in these fights. Okay, your job is to throw the meteor shower on the clump. Okay, so it takes a few seconds, you just throw it there and it just works there. Okay, it doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it does it over time, and that puts a bit of pressure on the enemy bruisers. And what that does is it makes them a bit uncomfortable, and they're not too cocky to push through when they're half HP. Okay, whereas if they're full HP, obviously they can just push through. And once you've done your meteor shower, your next job is really to look for anybody in your backline. You're looking out for your friends who are playing a mage, and you're looking out for your healers. Okay, so what you want is to coordinate and hit any of these hunters here that are pushing through, or any of their bruisers who might be pushing through in your backline, and you want to just blow those guys up. So call out one name at a time and basically just annihilate them and burst them down. Anybody who's played hunter or even a bruiser, they know that when you have 4 or 5 mages turn all of a sudden on you, you're kind of in deep shit, and you're either screaming for heals or running for your life. So the better we do that, and the more synchronized we are doing that, the easier it will be. And you're basically giving a break to all your healers, you're giving a break to your fire mages, so everybody can basically free cast. But that's really your job. And once those guys are clear, so if our back is secure and there's absolutely nobody in there, then of course, you know, you can push a bit forward, you push with the Zerg, or you hit more on the clumps. But other than that, your job is really to make sure this area is as clean as possible. And having said that, I think we will try our best to practice that as much as possible. I know the fire mages have already set up the TeamSpeak and as well the whispering channels amongst the teams. As you know, the fire mages are now split across teams, so they still need to coordinate as one group, and we'll need to practice that more. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Otherwise, more or less, this is the tactical meeting, and this is what we're going to practice against Griffin Hearts and against others who we're going to practice with over and over and over. And OPS as well were possible, but ideally we want at least 10 versus 10 or 20 versus 20s to practice these points really well. Okay. All in all, this was pretty much the tactical meeting. It was mostly focused about the Zerg fighting and about everybody's roles, so everybody understands what the job is really in any of these fights. Okay, so we want to be a bit more disciplined, a bit more organized, and that's the way we're gonna keep improving. What you don't want is for, you know, tanks to run to the back line and everybody kind of doing something else, because that way we're not really organized, and we'll just continue to be all over the place in all the fights, and we don't want that. Okay, we want some really good fights. So keep up the good work, guys, and I'll see you in the next meeting. Thank you.